Well, actually, Greek people, they are very sensitive regarding climate change. Just because Greece's most valuable asset is climate and nature. So our tourist infrastructure, our services, the health condition in Greece are all based on the good standing of our natural environment. And Greece is going to have the presidency of the European Union in these next 6 months. That is that we're really trying to put on the agenda the climate change issue in terms of fostering renewable energy sources. We do think that Europe could be a leader in a low-carbon economy if Europe and the neighboring countries are going to adopt even more and better strategies on renewable sources energy. So we would like definitely to do that. That's our first priority. And then there is another sector that we did not take into due account up to now, that is how the sustainable development and management of the sea could actually contribute to mitigation and adaptation to climate change. So one of the other sectors that Greece is going to put forth as the leader in the European Union is going to be blue growth. That is, how we can manage our natural resources that are related to sea, either it is biodiversity of the marine environment or the possibility of the sea and biodiversity to absorb carbon dioxide, or we can use the sea to have renewable energy sources there.
One of the big, I guess, talking points at this conference, and I guess the last few relating to climate change, is how lots of developed countries which are facing economic troubles at home can contribute, I guess, what many people say is their fair share of finances. Greece's issues have been well documented around the world. How do you see Greece being able to sort of contribute in terms of finance and even cutting its own emissions during such a difficult time for the country?
Well, Greece is also a leader in the neighboring countries of the European Union, the Mediterranean countries, and we're very sensitive to their issues as well because these are common issues. So Greece definitely is very much interested in giving direct finance and finance in science and development in the developing countries. We don't think that just by giving money you can help somebody to cope with the problems. You have to build capacity in these countries. So our priority number one is to build coalitions in science and also in the industry to growth well in order to adapt to climate change, and also to build coalitions in science to mitigate climate change. And of course, we're very much interested into financing developing countries in order to develop the capacity of having economies there that could keep the people in place and would enable them to live and work there. Otherwise, we know that migration that comes out of climate change conditions would be a big problem for developed countries. And Greece is one of those countries that actually receive migrants that come from other countries because of financial issues and climate change. So we would definitely like to work with developing countries on that. Greece is also very sensitive on the natural disasters issue, and because Greece has suffered out of natural disasters such as the wildfires back in 2007, or right now I would say something which is not qualified as a natural disaster, but is an adverse natural phenomenon of climate change, which is coastal erosion. So Greece and other coastal countries, they do suffer out of these adverse impacts of climate change, and they would like all together to work on that. For example, we also have another network of parliamentarians on coastal erosion issues, which is called the Circle of the Mediterranean Parliamentarians for Sustainable Development. People and parliamentarians from all over the European, Mediterranean, African, and Middle East countries, they gather together to see how we can abate the effects of climate change. Coastal erosion is number one. And of course, all issues of the natural disasters that could come because of climate change and climate variability.
When you look at this conference, and no doubt you've spoken to fellow European partners, are you sensing there is progress here? Are you sensing there is European Union unity on the issue of
There
climate
is
change? 'Cause
definitely unity on behalf of the European Union. And what I find to be the most interesting part in this conference is the participation of the private financing for the first time in all these green investments. However, I also see that there is a competition between the powers, between Canada, China, EU, etc., of who is going not to take the leadership, but who is going to gain the best, let's say so, financial incentives. And we are going to be in a dilemma, I think, after 2 years, in 2015, when we're going to decide whether we will all going to be parts of the legally binding protocol or not. There is a problem that we might decide that nobody is going to bound itself by the protocol. This is the greatest fear, I think, that we're going to face. So from the EU perspective, everybody should be part to this legally binding protocol. And apart from the legally binding obligations, I think that we should do even more than those, even more than the legally binding obligations. We should take the extra step, because this extra step in mitigating and adapting climate change would be good for us, for every country that does that. So we should not think of our legally binding obligations, our obligations that benefits the neighbor, but they benefit ourselves. And we should not see these obligations on terms of competitiveness. The one thing that I don't see progressing that much in this conference, and maybe in the future as well, and that's a pity, is progressive on the cooperation in science. For example, I do stand that we should have a kind of cooperation between scientific groups, the academic, the epistemic community, let's say so, regarding capture and conversion of CO2. Because no matter how many steps we're going to take to slow our economies down or to proceed to a carbon-free economy, this will take years, and climate change is already here. That means that the only way that we can really contribute to solving the problem of climate change is to do something with the CO2 that is already out there and threatens us. And we have to capture as much CO2 as possible, and we have to convert CO2 in something different. And there are some pilot programs that are out there right now, especially in the US universities, that we can take, we can adapt, and we can expand. So I think that leadership in scientific cooperation regarding CO2 capture, storage, and conversion should be our #1 priority. And then financing for adaptation to climate change, and of course, financing for the countries that are now in the financial crisis era, so that these countries would not go the other way around, instead of, let's say so, follow sustainable aims to go for growth. Once again, we don't want to go like many decades back. We need to go forward, and we need the assistance of everybody to that.